What if I told you that a poor girl who spent her days selling candies at traffic lights became the owner of the largest mansion in the city? Shocking, isn't it? But the real impact isn't in the $1 million inheritance she received. It's in what she did with that power. She faced hidden enemies, uncovered buried secrets, and turned her pain into hope for hundreds of people. This is the story of Clara, the girl who made an entire city question what it truly means to be wealthy. Get ready to dive into a tale of mystery, justice, and emotional twists. And if you want to follow stories that change the way you see life, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because this journey will leave a mark on you. Clara woke up early every day, even before the sun rose. While most of the city was still asleep, she was already arranging her small box of candies and preparing to face the streets. Every traffic light became her daily stage, where shyness had no place and courage had to be stronger than fatigue. Anyone watching her could see it wasn't just a job, it was survival in its purest form. Amid the rush of cars, Clara stood out with her insistent smile. Even though her simple clothes revealed a hard life, she carried herself with dignity, uncommon for someone so young. Drivers had grown used to the figure of the girl offering candies with a steady gaze, as if each sweet was more than just a product. It was also a reminder of her determination. Her routine, though repetitive, was filled with constant challenges. Scorching sun, unexpected rain, days when almost no one stopped their car. Still, Clara never gave up. There was a discipline within her that made her endure, even when the day's earnings barely covered household expenses. With every coin she received, she carried the feeling of taking one more step toward the future she stubbornly dreamed of. At the end of each day, she returned home with light pockets, but a heart heavy with responsibility. She was the one who helped her mother organize the little they had, and many times the one who calmed her younger siblings in the face of hardship. Despite her young age, she assumed the role of provider with rare seriousness, as if she already understood that her struggle was not only for herself, but for everyone around her. The city, so accustomed to seeing her daily, was divided in opinion. To some, Clara represented hope, an example that determination could blossom even in the unlikeliest places. To others, she was just another sad portrait of inequality that refused to fade. Between glances of compassion and indifference, she carried on, undeterred by what others said or thought. Even on the hardest days, Clara remained resilient. The closed window of a car or the abrupt refusal of a driver wasn't enough to crush her will. She would simply take a deep breath and move on to the next, as if each rejection was just another step on her long staircase. There was a quiet strength in her that spoke of endurance without uttering a word, and so her figure became part of the city's landscape. The red light was no longer just a pause in traffic, but the space where the candy girl appeared, offering her smile along with small, colorful wrappers. It was impossible not to notice how such a simple gesture concealed a much bigger story, still unknown to most. What no one imagined was that, while Clara repeated her daily routine, someone was watching her from afar. Someone who saw more than a candy seller. They saw the spark of something extraordinary that was yet to come. In the same city where Clara fought her daily battles, there was a figure who stirred curiosity and silence at the same time. Mr. Augusto, an elderly man, owner of the largest mansion in town, surrounded by tall gates and impeccable gardens. His presence on the streets was rare, but when he appeared, he drew stares as if he were a character taken straight out of an old book. Augusto had a reputation for eccentricity. Some said he was a reclusive genius. Others believed he hid dark secrets within those stone walls. Little was known about his family, and even less about his friends. The truth was that the old man preferred isolation, limiting himself to watching the world from a distance, almost like a spectator of a play he no longer wished to perform in. What stood out was his silent routine. From the balcony of the mansion, with sharp and thoughtful eyes, Augusto spent long minutes observing the movement of the city. Many locals found it strange, but there was in his expression a mix of melancholy and curiosity, like someone searching for something long lost. With his always immaculate attire, the old man carried an air of respect and authority. Yet beneath it all there was a loneliness too obvious to disguise. People whispered that despite his wealth he carried an emptiness in his chest, a void no fortune could fill. His mansion was vast, but it echoed like a space far too big to house just one man. For months, Augusto discreetly observed Clara. It was not by chance. There was something about that girl that caught his attention relentlessly. The determination, etched on her face, contrasted with the fragility he felt within himself. Somehow, Clara represented what Augusto seemed to seek, a genuine strength, born from struggle rather than privilege. While many hurried past the girl at the traffic lights, Augusto noticed details no one else did. The way she held the candy box, the firmness in her gaze toward drivers, and how she never gave up, even in the face of indifference. It was like witnessing a silent performance that only he understood. This interest, however, remained a secret. Augusto never mentioned her to anyone, nor let a single word slip about the girl. He kept this curiosity to himself, almost as if it were a confidence shared only between him and destiny. Yet within him grew the desire to break the silence and step closer. And so, in the contrast between the lonely luxury of the mansion and Clara's harsh life on the streets, an invisible bond was forming. Two completely different worlds on the verge of colliding under unexpected circumstances that would change not only her life, but also the legacy he would leave behind. One day, Augusto decided to break the silence he had kept for so many months. While Clara was offering candies at the traffic light, he stepped out of his car with slow yet firm steps, drawing attention not only from her but also from those passing by. The girl, used to quick refusals or hurried coins, found the unusual gesture strange. Right there in the middle of the street, the first thread of dialogue began to weave. Augusto, with his deep and measured voice, asked the girl's name and heard back, "Clara." The sound of that simple word seemed to echo inside him with unexpected strength. Clara, still wary, answered his questions cautiously, but could not ignore the curious gaze of that man who, unlike the others, truly seemed to want to listen. Gradually, their conversations began to repeat. Sometimes at the traffic light, sometimes in discreet encounters at the mansion's gate, where Augusto allowed himself to be seen. He asked about her dreams, and Clara spoke of her desire to study, to live a different life, but never to abandon those by her side. The old man listened in silence, as if each of her words mirrored something he had once lost. The contrast between them was striking. On one side, a man who had everything but lived alone, in a house far too large. On the other, a girl who had almost nothing, yet carried within her an overflowing strength. This duality became the foundation of the unlikely friendship that was forming. It wasn't about wealth or poverty, but something deeper: the search for meaning. Clara, in her simplicity, offered Augusto something he could neither buy at an auction nor inherit from documents: authenticity. She didn't speak to please, nor worried about weighing each word. She shared stories of her routine, her mother, her siblings, as if opening her life came naturally. Augusto, in return, revealed small fragments of his past, always tinged with nostalgia. It didn't take long for the town to notice that unusual contact. Some said it was merely charity from a wealthy man. Others whispered bolder theories. But for the two of them, none of that mattered. Each encounter became an intimate space where such distant worlds could finally meet. Augusto saw in Clara the courage he lacked, and Clara saw in him a kind of safe harbor she had never known. It wasn't a relationship of favors, but of listening and recognition. Two souls separated by decades and life circumstances had found common ground, the need to be seen and understood, and in that fertile soil, watered by increasingly deep conversations, a silent decision began to take shape inside Augusto, something no one expected, but that would forever change the destiny of the candy girl. The unexpected happened on a quiet morning. The city awoke to the news of the sudden death of Augusto, the eccentric man who had so often intrigued the townspeople. Mourning was mixed with curiosity, for few truly knew who he was inside. For Clara, the news hit like a punch to the stomach. The man who had so often listened to her was no longer there. The following days were a whirlwind. The doors of the imposing mansion opened to lawyers, notaries, and formalities that seemed worlds apart from Clara's simple life. She, who had always watched that space from the outside, was now summoned to enter as part of a process that no one, even in the boldest rumors, could have imagined. In the mansion's grand hall, Clara sat among unfamiliar faces. Lawyers, witnesses, and staff composed a heavy, almost suffocating scene. Each word carried an air of mystery until finally, Augusto's will was opened. The written lines would change the course not only of Clara's life, but of the entire city. The document, read in solemn tones, revealed the unthinkable. Clara, the candy girl, had been named the sole heir to Augusto's mansion and his entire fortune. The silence that followed was so dense it felt almost tangible. Stares of shock crossed the room, as if the impossible had just unfolded before their eyes. Clara, stunned, could hardly believe what she was hearing. That fortune, which had always seemed so far beyond reach, now bore her name. But along with the revelation, a storm of doubts filled her mind. Why her? What had Augusto seen in her to entrust not only a house, but an entire legacy? Questions arose faster than answers. Outside, the news spread quickly. Whispers filled the streets. Local papers improvised headlines, and radio stations repeated the story with a tone of scandal. The girl who once sold candies at traffic lights was now the owner of the largest mansion in the city. To many, the reality felt more like the script of a soap opera than a concrete fact. While papers were signed and formalities continued, Clara remained silent. It wasn't ambition shining in her eyes, but astonishment, and even a trace of fear. It was as if she had been placed before a mirror reflecting two versions of herself: the simple girl who fought for survival on the streets, and the unexpected heiress of a world that wasn't hers. The will, however, was not just a legal document. It represented a passing of the torch, a final gesture from Augusto that carried mysteries yet to be revealed. And with each line, Clara realized that her life, once defined by the routine of traffic lights, would never be the same again. The news of the inheritance spread like wildfire. Within hours, every corner of the city was whispering Clara's name. In bars, markets, and even in bus lines, the conversation was the same. How had a girl who once sold candies at traffic lights become the owner of the largest mansion in the region? Curiosity mingled with astonishment. Some applauded Clara's luck, seeing her as a symbol of poetic justice. They said that, at last, someone humble had been recognized for her strength. Many commented that it was a gift from fate, a twist worthy of books and soap operas. To them, Clara represented the victory of the invisible, those who rarely had a voice, but there were also sideways glances. Part of the population could not accept the idea of a poor teenager taking a place they believed was reserved for people of another level. Prejudiced murmurs arose in circles of gossip, insinuating that the relationship between her and Augusto hid something scandalous. Envy gnawed silently. The mansion, once quiet, became a pilgrimage site. Cars stopped in front, crowds gathered at the gates, and journalists hunted for any new detail to publish. Cameras pointed at Clara turned her routine into a spectacle, as if each of her gestures were a scene awaited by the public. Opinions clashed in the pages of local newspapers. Some articles exalted her story of perseverance, while harsher columns questioned the legitimacy of the inheritance. The city seemed to be living inside a soap opera in real time, where every citizen believed they had the right to judge the candy girl's life. Clara, meanwhile, felt the weight of the turmoil. It wasn't easy to face the suspicious glances and the whispered remarks. Yet amid the chaos, voices of support also arose. Neighbors, former customers who once bought her candies, and even teachers who remembered the hard-working girl who had once sat in their classrooms. Gradually, the city's atmosphere became a blend of celebration and tension. On one side, those who saw Clara as the start of a new era of hope. On the other, those waiting for her downfall, eager to point fingers. Every corner became a stage for heated discussions about merit, justice, and destiny. And while the city buzzed with comments and expectations, Clara began to realize that her life was no longer just about inheriting a fortune. Something greater was at stake. Facing public opinion, navigating both the support and the hostility that loomed like a silent shadow. Clara soon discovered that inheriting a fortune was not synonymous with peace. She had barely begun to process her new reality when she found herself surrounded by lawyers, papers, and formalities that seemed to speak a foreign language. Every clause, every document carried a weight she had never imagined bearing. Money, once so distant, now felt more like a prison than a relief. Distant relatives of Augusto began to appear like shadows rising out of nowhere. People who had never cared for him in life now knocked at the mansion's door, demanding explanations, claiming family ties, and even insinuating rights over the inheritance. Clara, lost amid speeches filled with formality, silently wondered if she truly deserved to be there. The pressure also came from the city. While some applauded her, others demanded adult responsibility from her, as if she had the obligation to prove day after day that she was worthy of the inheritance. The candy girl, once invisible, was now judged at every step, every choice, as though her life had become a public spectacle. The nights grew long. Clara lay in the luxurious bedroom of the mansion, feeling the weight of a strange emptiness. Between decorated walls and expensive furniture, she still carried the memory of the simple bed she once shared with her siblings. Wealth did not erase the past, but instead made each memory return even more vividly, tinged with a painful nostalgia. Faced with so many doubts, Clara began to question whether she was truly prepared for such an abrupt change. What should she do with it all? Should she live as the wealthy did, or remain faithful to her roots? Torn between the fear of disappointing others and the desire to honor Augusto's memory, she found herself caught in an inner conflict with no easy solution. The gaze of the city offered no respite. Every trip to the market, every walk down the street was accompanied by whispers and piercing stares. The girl who had once gone unnoticed was now the constant subject of speculation, as if it were impossible to reconcile her humble origins with the luxuries she had inherited. The doubt grew. Could she remain the same in the face of such power? And yet, there was something in Clara that resisted. Amid the confusion, the memory of her conversations with Augusto served as a silent compass. He had seen in her more than an heir. He had seen someone capable of transformation, and it was this thought that kept her steady, even when everything around her seemed on the verge of collapse. But the weight of the inheritance still concealed greater challenges. Behind the envious stares and public pressure, hidden forces were beginning to move, ready to question her legitimacy and strip from her what she had only just gained. With the inheritance secured in her name, Clara began to face forces that until then had acted in the shadows. Some of Augusto's relatives, driven by resentment and greed, started to question the legitimacy of the will. They alleged manipulation, searched for loopholes in the law, and hired lawyers willing to use any maneuver to destabilize her. In the city, envy found fertile ground. Whispers turned into veiled accusations, malicious insinuations, and even rumors that Clara could never truly be the rightful heir. The murmurs in courthouse hallways and the gossip in cafes seemed to weave an invisible web of intrigue, increasingly harder to endure. There were also those who saw fortune as a chance for quick profit. People approached Clara with false smiles, offering outlandish business deals, improbable partnerships, and even opportunistic marriage proposals. The candy girl, now surrounded by spotlights, had become the target of opportunists disguised as allies. The weight of legal and social pressure began to corrode her strength. Clara, once accustomed to fighting against cold and hunger, now faced invisible enemies, documents, accusations, and strategies hidden behind wooden desks and official seals. The battlefield had changed, but the war continued. Among her adversaries, A group of Augusto's relatives stood out, united silently against her. They gathered forged evidence, twisted old letters, and even dubious witnesses in an attempt to annul the will. At stake was not only the mansion, but Clara's right to preserve the memory of the man who had believed in her. Clara, though fragile before the avalanche of attacks, found within herself a thread of courage. She remembered Augusto's words, his steady gaze, and the trust he had placed in her. That memory worked like an invisible armor, strong enough to keep her standing amid the storm. Meanwhile, the city divided once again. Some joined the web of intrigues, feeding doubt about her legitimacy, while others became loyal defenders, willing to testify on behalf of the girl who had once won their hearts in the streets. The inheritance, more than wealth, had become a mirror of human intentions, and in this escalating tension, Clara realized her true enemies were not only those before her, but those hiding behind masks, driven by hidden interests. The power struggle was only beginning, and the mansion still held secrets capable of changing the course of this battle. Alone in the corridors of the mansion, Clara began to explore every corner of the place that had once seemed unreachable to her. The hallways were long, covered with old rugs that muffled the sound of her footsteps. The walls displayed portraits of past generations, painted eyes that seemed to follow her in silence. It felt like walking inside a secret only now being revealed. In one of the libraries, between dark wooden shelves and dust-covered books, Clara found the first traces of Augusto's hidden past. Aged notebooks, yellowed letters, and forgotten diaries formed a mosaic of memories that, little by little, revealed a man far beyond the eccentric image the city had known. Each page she read brought forth the pains and injustices Augusto had endured. There were accounts of family betrayals, businesses lost through misplaced trust, and a solitude that deepened over time. Clara understood that her inheritance was not merely material. It was also the weight of a life marked by invisible scars. The letters also revealed a compassionate side. Augusto had secretly helped people, funded the studies of young students, and saved families from financial ruin without ever seeking recognition. Clara realized that, deep down, he saw himself in her. Someone fighting against the tide, never waiting for applause. That explained the trust he had placed in the Candy Girl. Further on, in a safe hidden behind a painting, Clara found documents proving old legal disputes. Within them lay evidence of the injustices Augusto had suffered at the hands of the same relatives who now attacked her. The truth came to light, and with it the conviction that he had chosen her as his heir not by chance, but as a final act of justice. Each discovery became a link connecting Clara to the man who was no longer there. It was as if Augusto guided her even in absence, showing her that his life had not been in vain. The silence of the mansion, once intimidating, began to take on a new tone, one of trust and purpose. But with every revelation also came risk. The more Clara uncovered, the more she realized those secrets could change the course of the battle she faced against her hidden enemies. The documents in her hands were more valuable than any sum of money. They were the key to protecting her legitimacy. And in that atmosphere heavy with mystery, Clara understood that the mansion was not just a gift. It was a guardian of memories, a silent battlefield where Augusto's past and her future intertwined. And with each step, it became clearer that she was about to turn the game around. After days immersed in secrets and conflicts, Clara realized she could not live only on the defensive. Something greater was at stake, the chance to transform her pain and her inheritance into something meaningful. Fear gave way to determination, and the Candy Girl began to shape a new purpose for the future. She walked through the mansion no longer as an intruder, but as someone who carried within her the mission of honoring Augusto's memory. She remembered the letters in which he spoke about injustice and solidarity, and understood she should follow the same path. It wasn't about luxury or power, but about using it to brighten other lives. Clara began gathering trustworthy people. She called on former teachers, neighbors, and even volunteers who believed in her story. At the mansion's grand table, where silence had once reigned, plans began to take shape. Classes for children, opportunities for young people, support programs for families in need. The space once seen as a symbol of solitude was now filled with life. The city, initially skeptical, started to be surprised. The heiress many judged as inexperienced demonstrated clarity and courage. There was no ostentation in her gestures, only a genuine care for every detail. Clara was becoming not just the owner of a fortune, but the leader of a movement that awakened hope. Even so, the criticism did not vanish. Some said it was just a phase. Others accused her of seeking attention. But this time, Clara was unfazed. Instead of defending herself, she showed results. Each child who gained an opportunity, each family that found support was her silent answer to those who doubted her. The mansion, once surrounded by walls of suspicion, turned into a meeting place. Dark corridors were lit by the laughter of children, and once forgotten gardens hosted workshops and activities. Clara understood that the true power of the inheritance lay not in the gold or luxurious walls, but in the impact it could create. And little by little, Clara herself was changing. The girl who once sold candies was now seen as someone capable of inspiring others. Her uncertain gaze gave way to a firm posture, though she never lost the simplicity that always defined her. Her identity was not erased by wealth. On the contrary, it blossomed with it. But as Clara advanced, new challenges loomed. Her decision to transform the city did not go unnoticed. Opposing forces would rise again, questioning her choices and testing her strength. The stage was being set for an even greater shock. The great day arrived. The mansion, once marked by silence and the weight of solitude, opened its doors for something unprecedented, a social project dreamed of and carried out by Clara. Children who once roamed the streets in search of survival now crossed the gates with eyes shining with hope. What had once been a symbol of isolation was now the stage for a new beginning. Clara, still in her simple clothes, the old battle uniform, a faded orange t-shirt and a worn green shoulder bag, walked through the corridors accompanied by laughter, chatter, and light footsteps. Her image contrasted with the grandeur of the halls, but it was precisely that simplicity that made the scene so powerful. The candy girl had become the guardian of a greater future. In the gardens, tables were set with books, toys, and study materials. Volunteers, teachers, and neighbors filled spaces that had once breathed only loneliness. The air seemed different, as if the mansion had finally found its true purpose. Every corner echoed with life. Every detail overflowed with meaning. The city, once divided, gathered in front of that transformation. Journalists, onlookers, and even the most skeptical stood in disbelief at what they saw. Clara had not been content to inherit. She had reinvented. That poor teenager who once supported her family by selling candies at traffic lights had now become living proof that true wealth is not what we keep, but what we share. Many could not hold back their tears, some out of emotion, others out of regret for having doubted her. The shock that had once been disbelief was now astonishment in the face of such generosity. Clara did not seek applause, yet her presence inspired everyone there to believe that transformation was possible. In that moment, Clara looked at Augusto's portrait hanging in the grand hall. The old man's contemplative gaze seemed to meet hers, as if approving every choice. It was not only the mansion being honored, but the memory of a man who had found in a girl the continuation of his own fight against injustice. The impact was so profound that the city would never be the same. Children found opportunities, adults discovered new forms of collaboration, and the entire community came to see that power does not lie in wealth itself, but in the destiny we give to it. Clara had become more than an heiress. She had become a symbol. And so the girl who once sold candies became the guardian of hope. The shock that once divided now united. But in Clara's heart, one certainty remained. This was only the first page of a new story, written not with luxury but with purpose and courage. And now I ask you, what would you do if you inherited not just a fortune, but also the responsibility of transforming lives? Would you have the courage to use that power to create real change? Or would you let yourself be swallowed by the weight of other people's opinions? How many times have you wondered if you're truly living with purpose and/or just surviving? Clara's story shows us that it's not the size of the inheritance that matters, but the size of your vision. The world is full of opportunities hidden in the most unlikely places. The question is, are you ready to see them? If this reflection stirred something inside you, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because here you'll find stories and ideas that could be the turning point in your life.